What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to FudgeMuppet. Recently I've been spending a lot of time thinking about stealing the most treasured items from people's pockets. In video games, I should say, and in particular within the snow-covered lands of Skyrim. As a game function, pickpocketing does exactly what you'd expect it to. You sneak up behind someone and attempt to take something from their possession without them knowing. In Skyrim, the skill eventually ends up quite useful for the quick acquisition of septims, allowing you to zoom around town in sneak mode, scooping up gems and enchanted rings and necklaces from the pockets of citizens. You can sell them to a Thieves Guild vendor or flip them to a regular merchant if you've got the fence perk from the speech skill tree. However, even after my many playthroughs with thief builds, it's just never been the most riveting experience for me personally. Sure, you can make plenty of money with it after finally leveling it up enough to not have to constantly save the game and reload every time you get caught, but heaps of skills in Skyrim can make you that sweet Shea Gorath cheese. Enchanting, alchemy, smithing, a combination of the three, and these skills don't risk a jail sentence and have much more functionality outside of just acquiring wealth, which by the way isn't particularly useful in Skyrim anyway once you've got the character setup you desire. Even plain old legally approved high-level dungeon crawling can pull in plenty of gold when you're looting one ebony weapon after the next, including enchanted gear and other shiny valuables stashed away in ruins. Let me make it clear that today's video is not going to say that Pickpocket sucks or is terrible. It simply does what you'd expect it to, with a few enjoyable perks to use at higher levels. So yes, taking the sword off a bandit before he spots you is fun. Putting a poison in someone's pocket while it makes no sense why they drink it can also feel cool, and stripping the armor off every bandit at Valtheim Towers to make them all nude before battle can give you a laugh. But really what makes people use Pickpocket is almost always role-playing. Feeling like a thief is at the heart of the skill, and as big lovers of role-playing here at FudgeMuppet, that's a completely valid reason. But without that aspect, it feels a bit weak being its own skill. One could argue that the main driver behind using the pickpocket skill in Skyrim is actually because the Thieves Guild faction exists. Without such a faction, which in Skyrim could have been more thiefy, video on that linked below, I can't imagine the skill being too popular. So without good role-playing opportunities, why choose it over another skill that makes more septims and enhances more foundational aspects of the game, such as combat? Again, I want to stress that I have enjoyed pickpocketing, and when you roleplay a thief, it's a game feature you want to have, but as far as being its own skill in Skyrim goes, it felt weak. In Oblivion, the Thieves Guild focused more on stealing things, and so I really felt like more of a thief character in my playthrough. But do you know what Oblivion didn't have? A pickpocket skill. Morrowind also didn't have a pickpocket skill, despite featuring a joinable Thieves Guild. Daggerfall is actually the only Elder Scrolls game prior to Skyrim with a pickpocket skill, but Elder Scrolls 2 had all kinds of niche skills, like one for swimming or speaking to centaurs. But that doesn't mean pickpocketing wasn't a feature in Morrowind and Oblivion. You'd still be doing it as a thief, it's just that your chance to pickpocket was simply based around things like your sneak skill, detection state, and the value and number of items, and even the target's sneak skill. Bethesda stripped out certain skills after the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, like hand-to-hand and acrobatics, or did things like merge mysticism spells into the alteration tree, but then added a pickpocket skill. I've never been a fan of perks that simply increase base effectiveness, especially those in Skyrim needing 5 ranks, as is the case with pickpocket. It could have made much more sense to simply leave pickpocket chance based on sneak and other mechanics, and then throw the coolest perks people like into a side branch in the sneak perk tree. I'm not saying that I really dislike pickpocket being a separate skill, it's simply there if I want to use it. However, when you look at it and apply Bethesda's own framework for streamlining, it does feel a bit odd that they chose to remove certain skills, but then add in this old skill from Daggerfall, which could have easily still existed in the exact same way functionally as it did in Skyrim, just as part of sneak. It could even be merged with lockpicking if you wanted to, and then we could change the skill name back to security, which is what lockpicking was called in Morrowind and Oblivion. After all, both talents require steady, coordinated hands. Now, I wouldn't necessarily be against a merge approach in the Elder Scrolls 6. Bethesda could just add the biggest bang for your buck perks to the sneak or lockpick perk trees, and save players spending a bunch of time to level a skill separately that simply isn't as useful as other skills. This way, role-playing wouldn't be hindered at all, and you'd still be able to do the same things you could with with pickpocketing in Skyrim, but it wouldn't be a FudgeMuppet skill discussion without providing some ideas on actually making pickpocket way more fun. So let's talk about a much more exciting route, actually enhancing the skill and making it truly worth investing time into. If we're not going to go with the option of making the skill more accessible with a merge, then we need to make sure it provides a stronger incentive for players to use it through making it not only more advantageous, but mainly by making it provide for more unique experiences than it did in Skyrim. There need to be more interesting uses for pickpocket in the world in terms of playstyle opportunities, quest approaches, and even intel collection while exploring. For example, imagine if High Rock is a province you visit in The Elder Scrolls 6, and you have the option to help different kingdoms, developing alliances of your choice. Then after helping one king with many quests, he begins to trust you and the competent results you bring, treating you more like an advisor. A week before a massive siege is to take place, the king sends a servant to summon you to the courtroom, where you're asked to give insight on what could be done to destabilize his rival's forces. There could be 4 or 5 approaches, options such as do nothing, an initial attack would only see them begin preparations earlier, or we need to block off their supply routes and stop the flow of new resources from coming in. However, another choice could be to recommend framing an important official, perhaps the most important leader of the kingdom's army. You have the king you are helping forge some official battle orders addressed to this enemy general, then using your stealth and pickpocket prowess, you sneak into the rival kingdom and place the battle orders in his pockets and proceed to have him exposed as a traitor. The opposing kingdom loses their best general, their most strategic tactician and competent fighter, right before a siege is about to take place. And because they saw no aggressive action from the kingdom you're helping, they're still not even preparing for the massive assault to come. By planting this incriminating evidence, the player has used the pickpocket skill to do far more than just steal necklaces off of townsfolk, and your decision to invest in the skill truly feels impactful. It's also just really cool to have multiple approaches in which pickpocket could end up useful, but also highly optional and not required by any means. When the siege does happen, the soldiers could be far less organized than if you go with a different approach, failing to adequately protect key areas, and maybe a side flank assault on the army you're helping that normally happens just flat out doesn't take place. Another thing to consider with approaches like this is the idea of actual dialogue checks based on skill levels, as is done in Fallout games. So perhaps this pickpocket approach is only available if your skill is 50 or higher in the first place, making it feel even more unique to your playthrough and not accessible to players with no skill investment who just plan to take the same approach and reload save game files if they fail their attempt. The pickpocket skill could also allow you to steal intel from enemy forces without them knowing. Perhaps to avoid any suspicion, you pickpocket tactical documents just to read and memorize them, and then plant them back on the holder, leaving in the shadows with insight into their next plan of attack. There's just so much more incentive to use the skill when this aspect of the experience is more prominent. Not only will you feel like someone who steals precious valuables, but also the type of character who can covertly gather intel and exploit it to whatever extent you see fit. Also, I think pickpocketing people should provide for more information opportunities in general, not just those leading to strategic outcomes in quests. What I mean by this is that simply searching through the pockets of people in a city should be a worthwhile experience outside of just stealing loot. It could be a fun new dimension to pickpocketing if more characters carried notes or items that hinted at certain things about them. Perhaps you decide to pickpocket one of the priests in an imperial cult temple, a scholarly old man known for his pious nature, only to find a very spicy love letter he's written to a member of a Debella cult in another city. It details his lustful desires for their next meet, and hints that him visiting the priestess for her services is a regular event. Later, you could overhear him mentioning to a fellow priest that he needs to visit this city again soon to address some sort of holy matters, but after reading his note, only you know the real reason. So you didn't steal something valuable, but you learned something new which is fun and helps flesh out the game's lore as you discover more about different people and factions. Perhaps you could use this to blackmail him in a quest later, but that's not really the point here. The whole idea is that there should just be information to gather that's fun purely for discovery's sake. And who are we to judge? We are pickpocketing a priest after all. Perhaps you delve through a merchant's merchant's pockets only to find a personal shopping list with some odd ingredients needed to make some personal medicine. It would be kind of funny if the player unlocked this potion recipe by reading it too, and could use it for their own benefit. Or perhaps searching in the gown of a court noble, you find an aggressive notice of debt collection from an underworld lending group that mentions the noble's desperate gambling habit and an ultimatum regarding repayment. This kind of stuff would lead to more fan theories and fun Easter egg type content while making pickpocketing more appealing. Information you uncover doesn't have to be as explicit as handwritten letters either. There could be more subtlety. Imagine finding a silver ring while pickpocketing a Breton innkeeper named Astav. It could be named Astav's engraved ring, and it's not until you take it and use the inspect feature that you can rotate it and zoom to see the engraved name, one of the barmaids he works with, and not his wife at home. Another idea could be a quest for a kingdom in Hammerfell where you must track down a necromancer, and there's a few ways to discover the truth, ending in the suspect turning hostile and unleashing spells at you. Well, imagine with Pickpocket you choose to search the pockets of the suspects without them knowing, and find a black soul gem in the possession of the undercover necromancer. You could report this as your evidence, leading to 5 guards arresting her when she least expects it, resulting in no battle with you. There could be all kinds of things you find that signify or hint at allegiances to specific causes or factions. So besides stealing valuables and gathering information that can change quest outcomes or simply flesh out the lore, what else could be done to enhance pickpocketing? Well, one idea I'd love to hear your thoughts on below is the idea of more situations where pickpocketing a key is useful. We could do this while keeping lockpicking mechanics the same or changing them, and I'll talk about a changed option soon enough, but either way it's important that if we do add more benefit to pickpocketing keys, that it's not to the point where the lockpicking skill feels less important. We'd still want a very high amount of doors, chests, jewelry, boxes, and everything else we love to pry into available for lockpicking. That said, it would be interesting if there were more locked doors than we saw in Skyrim that could only be opened with a pickpocketed key. So that lockpicking isn't really diminished by this, these doors wouldn't tend to lead anywhere quest changing, but in the same way that pickpocketing people could have you learn more about them or steal some loot, perhaps there are some locked rooms that can also lead to fascinating discoveries or valuable items. For example, imagine on Solstheim if you were skulking around in the basement of a house right around official's house, only to find a locked door. You find the official pickpocket a key called Cavern's Key, and go back to use it on this lower basement door. You're led into a small cavern area where you find a secret shrine the official has set up to worship Mehrunes Dagon. It wouldn't have to be some massive shrine or involve artifacts or a quest at all, just a personal use area of worship that clearly goes against the persona and values this Dunmer displays publicly. There could be some rare alchemical ingredients to loot, and maybe a gemstone or two. Another example could be taking a key off someone to break into a castle's treasury room filled with gems and coin. These situations should be quite rare, but adding more of them into the game gives even more reason to use pickpocketing and helps further flesh out the world. It's fun to go looking for secrets knowing that on occasion you really do find them. Or perhaps there's a quest option to send a threat in time of war. You want to gain access to an important noble's bedroom, but the door would be sealed with a master lock, so unless you're really good at lockpicking, you need to pickpocket the noble's key from them. Sneaking into their room as they sleep, you leave a dagger stabbed into their pillow beside their sleeping head, a Daggerfall Kingdom equivalent of the Godfather's horsehead scene. Remember, a manipulated target is often better than a dead one, and it doesn't make sense for many character builds roleplaying to just kill NPCs to get keys. As for potentially changing the lockpick mechanics, this isn't something I'm necessarily pushing for, but since we're discussing the topic, I'll put it forward as an idea for the comment section. What I'm talking about is implementing a mix of 2 mechanic changes, a no-attempt lock system as seen in Fallout games where you can't even attempt a master lock if your skill level is too low, and a more varied lock level system as seen in Morrowind where locks required skill levels that were more spread out, such as 15, 30, 85, 90, and so on. Together, these systems could make lockpicking and pickpocket more rewarding. The no-attempt system rewards lockpicking builds because it prevents players with low skill levels from being able to save the game before a challenging lock, or simply win with lots of lockpicks and heavy reliance on real-life skill at the minigame. It forces you to invest time into lockpicking if you want to reap the rewards associated with the skill. The varied lock system then provides more opportunities for lockpick characters within the no-attempt system so that they're not prevented prevented from accessing locks due to huge leaps in requirements from 25 to 50 to 75 and then to 100. Lock difficulty could increase in increments of 5, providing steady progression in the skill and the rewards you get. This then benefits pickpocketing because even if you're a thief character with a lockpicking skill of 50, if there is a level 65 door you really want to open, perhaps there could be an option and you'd want to go and track down and pickpocket the key. Of course, Bethesda would have to be mindful of quest and game design with this approach, but it would make pickpocketing keys more useful. Let me know what you think. And finally, we need to improve pickpocketing perks, if it remains as a skill. Of course, we should scrap the 5 perk point investment just to reach base mastery and leave boring stat boosts like that up to the skill itself. At most, we could have 2 perks for mastery, as is the case with some mod overhauls. As for cool perks that actually change your playstyle or just feel game changing, here's some ideas. Imagine a perk called Con Artist, allowing you to strike up a fake conversation with someone to distract them and direct their attention elsewhere while you rob them. The concept is based off the misdirection and sleight of hand techniques that many street thieves have mastered throughout history. This perk would allow a pickpocketing attempt to take place while the target and others are aware of your presence. The chance to succeed would be lower than if you were sneaking and not detected at all, but this technique could be useful for pickpocket attempts when you're in full sight of crowds but want to get away with some thievery anyway. Another cool pickpocket perk could be called Shackle. Imagine if there was a miscellaneous shackles item that you could create or buy, which you could use to cuff an enemy's feet and render them unable to run or fight properly. The item could be used normally in bounty hunting quests after downing the target in order to bring them back to an authority alive. However, with this shackle perk, you could sneak up on any target, bounty quest or not, and use the items on them with a reverse pickpocket attempt. Like any reverse pickpocket, you may not always succeed, but if you do, the enemy would be immobilized until the end of battle. The stronger the enemy, the harder the chance to pull it off. Very strategic to implement before battle begins, or just to capture a bounty target before they can react. I also liked what Skyrim was going for with the whole reverse pickpocketing poisons to damage enemies thing, but I think the perk could be changed to feel more realistic if instead you had to poison something that was already in an NPC's inventory. I'm talking about poisoning food like bread or fruit that an NPC has, or even poisoning a potion that they'd be planning to use in battle. If the player could create their own poisoned food ahead of time, perhaps this could also be reverse pickpocketed onto NPCs and used similarly to poisoned apples in Oblivion. We'd also want to keep cool pickpocket perks like those used for stealing weapons or pieces of apparel equipped on NPCs. I know everyone loves the extra pockets perk for more carry weight, so we could keep something like that around as well, although I do think most people chose it for general playthrough convenience and not because they're pickpocketing lots of heavy things and need more space for it. We should definitely retain a perk that makes pickpocketing certain items, such as keys or gold, easier. I actually prefer grouping many items into one perk, as is the case with various Skyrim perk overhaul mods, such as Valkyrie. This has the cut purse perk increase the odds of pickpocketing gold, keys, gems, and jewelry by 50%. I also like the perk from the Adamant mod called Unsuspecting Mark, which similarly to Skyrim's Night Thief perk, grants a higher pickpocket chance if the target is asleep, but in addition also applies if they are sitting down or working at any crafting station. The Valkyrie and Ordinator mods also have other niche perk ideas. There's one to have your bounties for non-violent crimes diminish by a certain amount each day, or even using a trained rabbit to lead you to the nearest loose valuable item. There's a perk to increase sneaking and movement speed after a successful pickpocket takes place, and even a once-a-day power to distract a group of people around a target, meaning you will gain no bounty if they are the only witnesses of your crimes. While all of these may not feel super game-changing, they still go far beyond what we saw in Skyrim, and I think there's plenty of inspiration we can take from there. Overall, I would love to see the pickpocket skill get some more love, with cooler perks and more opportunities to use it in creative ways, particularly in quests. That, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up this Elder Scrolls discussion on Skyrim's pickpocket skill and what could be done to make it more enjoyable and feel truly worth it for many players to invest time and perks into. Thank you so much for watching the video all the way through and supporting the channel. It means so much to know that people are as passionate about the Elder Scrolls world and game series as we are. Please let us know what you think about the pickpocket skill and what parts you liked and what you'd love to see changed to make it even better. Social media links can be found in the description below if you're interested. My name is Michael and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.